So the food system, like Lindsay said, and we hear it all the time, but we're defining it here in this room. Feel free to let us know if you have any additional definitions, but the food system is as the path that food travels from conception in the field all the way to digestion in the stomach, so from seed to stomach. And this includes the growing, harvesting, processing, packaging, transporting, marketing, consuming, and the disposing of food. So that's the big food system. All of those things are included. So then local, we're talking about a local food system. Local can be defined as many different terms, but for our session here, we're defining local as food grown and consumed within the state, and hopefully here Alabama, and within a 200-mile radius, so even touching Atlanta and sometimes Mississippi, so just in our area. But then outputs, so we're getting more into the logic model, but there's one heading on that table, and it says outputs. And we want to think of that as what we put out there. So what are the products and services that actually lead to outcomes? And outcomes is defined as what comes out of it. So what is the change in knowledge, the behavior, or the conditions?
Like he's saying, it's not all food does not start in the field. Some food definitely starts in laboratories. And that is food in our food system. So that's definitely something we can think to add in the future. So we will make a note about that.
All right, and then I guess we're going to go ahead and get into the logic model. And a logic model is just a tool that is used for planning, programs, and assessment. So that's what we're here for. We're going to get into an example of this logic model. You all have a copy of that in front of you. But we're really looking to see how we can get some programs and some evaluations of those programs that are related to local food systems.
So just to round that definition out, so we have a logic model is a tool, and it's a tool to basically take you from one thing to the end of something else, a way to graphically put your thoughts out there and a way to think. And also it's a tool used heavily in, like our people have been saying, grants, and like the brother here said, RFP, a request for proposal. So if you're not familiar with grants, or if you are familiar with grants, so it's a tool, but the purpose, one of its greatest functions is using grant writing. So it's a skill set also that if you master it, it will make you more effective in writing grants. Because anyone ever reviewed grants before? Anyone's ever reviewed grants? Right. So anyone had experience reviewing grants, what's one of the first places they jump to or look at? And if you don't have a strong logic model, it's quick to be like bottom of the pile, right? And the thing about the logic model is everyone doesn't have, it's knowledge, right? So everyone doesn't have access to the same information. So we want to make sure that we all get a great base understanding of logic models and actually come out with one by the end of this so that we could use, or you could use, it's shared, right? So we're not going to take this logic model and be like, thanks, now we're going to do, Jasmine's going to do her grant, we're going to do our grant. Thank y'all for the knowledge. It's free, it's open, so you can use it as well on anything that it applies to. So looking through the logic model, going across from the top to the bottom. So the first thing you start off with is the situation, right? So you start off with what is your problem, what is your issue, what are you trying to fix? And we're going to go through this exercise together. So I'm just going to briefly go over these topics and headings. And for some of you, this may be review. So then next we go into inputs. So you have a situation. So let's say like the situation is all my cats keep dying. I don't know why. This is general. I'm being facetious. Work with me here. So all my cats keep dying. So the input, what am I invested? What's my resource? What is my contribution? What is being put into this program, right? So do I have people on the ground? Do I have people working with this? What am I putting into it? And then we move into activities. So activities are the services that you're going to provide, what steps you're going to take. So of course activities, that's your big word. And then when we get to outputs, these are the products and services that are going to lead to outcomes. If you remember anything, one of the key things people get caught up on a lot is what is the difference between an output and an outcome. They're not the same thing, although they're similar words. First thing to remember is the outputs lead to outcomes. So if you put first, so if you put first, then the output leads to the outcome. And the output are the actual programs and services that you're providing that lead you to the outcomes. And another way I remember is outcomes are the big thing, because that's what comes out. And outcomes are broken into three things when it comes to extension especially, or just in general. These are changes in knowledge. So Did I learn a new way? Like now I learn I need to stop feeding my cat a lot of food. That's why my cat was dying. So I have a change in knowledge. I'm a better provider of service to small animals. And then my actions are, so I got a lid so the cat just can't eat whenever it wants. So I've changed my behavior. Now my knowledge has changed. I know better. What happens? You know better, you what?
Do better.
Exactly. So now that I know better, I can do better. I put a lid on the food. The cat's just not free range, right? And then the last thing is when societal conditions improve. So now all the cats that I'll ever have and that they'll ever have, their lives are improved because this knowledge, this change, this behavior has happened. So I'm sorry, I'm bad at analogies. That was probably not the best analogy.
Sharing it, maybe sharing it with other people so that they can actually do this, the practices that you replicate.
Thank you. And so he added to that. So now it's different because I've told all my friends, like, you can't just feed your cat anytime it wants because you love it. You better put a lid on its food because it needs it. And now you changed your ways and she's changed her ways, and now generations of cats will live on because of our behavior and knowledge growth. So outputs lead to what?
Outcomes.
Outputs lead to what?
Outcomes.
Great. And outcomes are changes in what?
Knowledge, actions, and conditions.
And condition. Thank you. And then underneath it, right? Because there's the surface, but it's what lies beneath, right? You see, as above, so below. So underneath all of this are two things: assumptions and external factors. Assumptions are, as you can see on here, certain premises based on theory that underline it. So like, maybe I assume that cats were smart enough to control their diets. I was wrong. So my assumptions led to all of my actions, my behaviors. Then there's external factors. So Jasmine comes over to my house, she takes the lid off and she doesn't know. And so that's an external factor. She wouldn't do that. Jasmine loves cats. She would not do that. But this is an external factor beyond my control.
We dealt with the issue of being a community with challenges to access to good food.
Yes.
We would describe ourselves. We described ourselves as a food desert. I use the language food apartheid to differentiate a little bit, but to sort of broaden how we talk about it. That we're a situation where inequities have been created and have been set up, and that are not actually natural. A desert is a natural space, however, right?
Exactly.
But there's room for all of it in talking about it, because that's how describe the situation that we're in, where there just isn't access to good food. Okay, so under inputs, what we invested, we recognize what we have. These are the things that we have currently. We have vacant lots. Many people, particularly in rural situations, have a little bit of land. We acknowledge that container gardening is still an option for people. So we have containers, right? We have things like that. We have senior farmers and elder farmers with knowledge in the community. We have the ability and the knowledge to do seed keeping, right? So that we preserve our own seeds from year to year, keeping our food and our food system out of the hands of, and I said again, you see, I didn't say seed saving, I said seed keeping very specifically.
Yes.
Because it comes not just with the biological material of the seed, but also how to use it. One of the problems where I am in Philadelphia is that many black people have departed completely, or almost completely, from their traditional foods, right? So saving the seed alone makes it just ritual food as opposed to this being a part of our daily life. We also have youth as an asset, right? So we have young people, right, with energy and ready to work. Moving into activities, what we do, we had a lot of good contributions. We had people of all ages in our group, and so there were different references. We can make connections to one of the first things that came was making connections to county, state, and federal agencies for assistance, right? This would include, but not be limited to, USDA or state departments of ag, right? But we also take it outside of the completely governmental, right? And think about what are the other entities and institutions, that can assist us with farming, and there are some buy fresh, buy local, type green, those sorts of things, right? We put that we can involve schools. We have schools that are available on there with space and with young people. We have religious institutions, right? We talk about like why is it so hard to find food? Why is it so hard to get to farmers markets? Well, why isn't every masjid and every church after services having a farmers market set up?
Yeah.
That's
Say
easy
that
enough
again,
to do.
please?
Why isn't every church or masjid have a farmers market set up after service?
Thank you.
Right? So that's an option. Right, we think about in terms of what we have, right?
Yeah.
The logistics, and I want to honor what Brother Larry said too. There's a whole other question of why right?
Why?
That's a rhetorical question, and we're not trying to answer it.
Yes.
But again, it's an activity of a thing that we can do, right?
Okay.
It's set up our markets and food stands in our religious institutions because we know that they will be attended. Open our spaces, I mean our agricultural spaces, our little farms, our plots, our community gardens for education and touring. People don't do what they can't imagine, you know, and seeing something actually growing and seeing people using it and seeing people who look like them out there growing the food and harvesting it and processing it, that has one more step to moving people closer to doing for themselves. We talked about seniors, right? Again, that's like what, you know, seniors and elder farmers. We talked particularly about chemical-free processes. I don't know where that fits in there in terms of what we said it. Please feel free, y'all, to jump in and correct me or add on at any point. But we talked about chemical-free, moving towards chemical-free practices in order to be, of course, self-sufficient, self-sustaining, heal the land, heal ourselves, and all of that, right?
We said that as an activity. One of the activities. That where we can aim, that one of the outputs from that activity would be to be certified organic, or to be certified chemically free. It may not be necessarily an attainable goal, but it's a goal that would just enhance our food area.
And we gotta start dreaming before we start doing too. Conferences, going to conferences and going to courses, right? And not just the same ones that we always do, but finding out what's happening either locally near to us or in other parts of the country and the region. This is important. Folks will give scholarships. They'll bring you to come and then bringing that knowledge back. So that's again, this is what we do. Who we reach, our participants. We talked about reaching our seniors, our elders who still have some of this knowledge. We talked about reaching religious institutions again, healthcare providers. We talked about reaching and doing outreach to young adults and youth. You got folks who are ready to do the work, or may not necessarily be ready to do the work, but if we model that for them, we can bring them. That's the only way that we actually, pass it on. We want to actually be sustainable, which means going into the future. Then we do it with young people.
Talked about. For some reason, I was nominated to report. So we talked about this a little bit more broadly, and honestly, I'm just going to fess up. Our group didn't use this. We just used the questions that were on the board. So for assets, we talked about services that exist. So MACOA and in Chilton County, we talked about the MACOA. It's the Montgomery Area Council on Aging. These organizations are hubs for the Meals on Wheels program.
Oh, right.
So we talked about how that's a federal program, but how we were sort of unsure of like how it trickles down to what agency is delivering that program in every area. We weren't sure if like anyone can volunteer to deliver that program or what.
And that's the Meals on Wheels? Yeah. Okay.
And then another asset we talked about was having the community gardens in schools. Nice. Some schools in Bullock and Barber County under TUSEP are doing gardens where the food goes home with the families, and so they're trying to expand on that.
And TUSEP, is that Tuskegee?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A cooperative extension? Just for the
another asset was using creative ways to reduce food waste. So we all discovered this app called Food Rescue US, which is something that was mentioned in a meeting I went to up at Auburn. Jasmine was there, but that people can connect like, hey, we've got food left over from this big event and we want to know where we can bring it.
So you snap a picture of it and it goes to a certain server and you have a certain amount of time to come and pick it up. Can you tell me the name of the app again?
It's called Food Rescue US. That's the one that came up for me, and it's actually done by another group, which is foodrunners.org.
Okay.
So maybe they do other things that I haven't looked into yet.
That's to pick up food that you have that was just left over.
Prepared.
Right. Another asset, someone was, again, kind of like the community gardens in schools, was that they're just taking it upon themselves to grow a patch of vegetables and give it away. So people who have this knowledge, I mean, that was someone in our group was already doing that. They were growing turnip greens to just give away. let's see. A nonprofit had come in and asked for donations from a concert to go to actually Al Hook's produce to grow, to give away to a food bank. So I thought that was neat. So other creative ways to do stuff like that. Some of the needs that we talked about, the things that need to change, are again with reducing food waste, like where can we bring food before we throw it in the trash? Because a lot of perfectly good food is going in the trash. In a lot of ways, like schools, restaurants. Anyway, another need is to expand on like community gardens that do exist. We talked about that, like as far as, I think this was already mentioned, funding sources and access to how to apply for those funding sources. So yeah.